Good morning. I wasn't sure if I had done a video before just on alignments in the room for the ballroom technique. I thought that I had, but I wasn't able to find it. So I'm going to go through the alignments in the room, have some beginners starting, and for the gentlemen particularly, it's really important for the driving skills, knowing where you're going and the amounts of turn that we need to know in order to keep the bodies together comfortably and looking nice, and also get around the room, knowing how much turn we can make with a partner. I'm going to use the little method of the box like we do in ballet. In ballet, we imagine that we're standing in a little box, and then we can use the corners of those boxes for our quasi positions, effacé positions, and so on. So to ballroom dancers, that may not make sense, but it works very well in ballet and also in ballroom. One of the problems that happens sometimes is with students, they hear diagonal wall, and they always imagine diagonal wall to be the furthest corner of the ballroom. Now, the longer that the ballroom gets, the straighter that diagonal wall would become as they go to the corner. So that's not necessarily a true diagonal wall. The true diagonal could be found localized within this little box. And at that point, of course, I'm now standing diagonal wall if this was my line of dance. And if it was the end of a long ballroom, it might be here. Now, that isn't to say that we can't cheat a little bit. The alignments are somewhat flexible. If your feather step would normally go diagonal center, you can take it somewhere between diagonal center and line of dance in order to stretch it out if you have a more narrow floor. So there are things you can do, but let's get a good understanding first. So let's say this is my line of dance. Now, the line of dance, we could say, is an invisible line going around the ballroom in a counterclockwise direction, which is the way we travel. But the ballroom dances, other than Viennese waltz, don't dance in an oval, they'll dance in a zigzag pattern. So our figures will be danced in these diagonals. So I'm now facing the line of dance if I'm in a straight line lined up with the walls of the room. And if it's the longer line of the room, it's my long line of dance. Now, if I just turn around, then I would be backing or against the line of dance. The alignments also are referred to as where we're traveling. So if I move forward here, I'll be moving forward facing the line of dance. If I turned around, I would be backing the line of dance. For instance, if I'm doing the man's part, 4, 5, 6, the reverse turn starts backing the line of dance. If I were moving this way, so I'm facing line of dance, that's the other direction, all right? So if I move that way, I'm moving against the line of dance, whether I'm moving backward or forward. Those get a little bit more tricky when we're moving generally in the opposite direction, but that happens in a lot of figures. So now if I put my right hand out or I turn my foot out in my little box, that's the wall, and that's logical because as I'm going down the long line of dance, the wall is closest to my right side. And then my foot going exactly 90 degrees to my left, or the center of the room is the center. Now my line of dance then, if we take a big ballroom and we split it in half, my line of dance is this entire width of the center of the room to the wall so that I can weave in and out on this line of dance. Ideally, I don't want my figures to be crossing the center line because that is the line of dance of the other couples coming the other way. So the line of dance is not a straight line, it is a direction in the room, but depending on the size of the ballroom, we could have 15, 20, 25 feet on my line of dance and another 25 feet or 20 feet on their line of dance. So if I then go from my 90 degrees, my line of dance and wall, and I bring my feet together about 45 degrees in the center, that's my true diagonal wall. So as I'm moving along in my dancing and I'm going diagonal wall, the corner of the room is probably over here. But like I said, that is not my true diagonal. But let's say that I'm on my true diagonal, and from what I did before, I don't have room, let's say, to dance a 3-step and a natural turn in foxtrot. Then as I come out of my feather finish, I might move my diagonal wall a little bit more to the corner of the room so that I have a little bit more space. So that's part of the maneuvering that we would do. So again, I'm facing the line of dance. That direction would be backing or against the line of dance. This is my wall. I'm now facing the wall, and I'm backing center, facing line of dance, facing center, or backing wall. Now in the technique, it would say facing center or moving center if that's the direction that I'm going to step in. And it would be backing wall or wall if I was moving in that direction. In between the center and the line of dance is my diagonal center. Again, if I was dancing in a long ballroom, I might go to the corner of that long ballroom. It is a diagonal center, but it's a little bit less than the true. So again, I would use that as my true diagonal center, but if I wanted to move myself down the floor more, I would cheat a little bit. Now, in the technique, there are many places where it might be mentioned that you would be between diagonal center and line of dance, or between diagonal wall and line of dance, where there's a little bit more turn, but we can be flexible also with that. Now, a little trick here are the diagonals moving that way. So I'm going to face the wall. I'm going to say, okay, now that's against the line of dance in that direction. So if I now go between those two places, this is diagonal wall against the line of dance. Now I'm facing center. There's my line of dance. That's against the line of dance. If I go into center, this is diagonal center against the line of dance. Now where might we have that? Let's say that I'm dancing as the man now, that I'm maybe dancing a back whisk, having done a reverse corte. So this step would be described as against the line of dance, DC against the line of dance, because that's the way I'm traveling. When I complete my whisk, which I don't have room to do, I have not turned. When I come out, now it's diagonal wall. That's because I'm moving forward. So there will be a mention whether you're DC, DW, or DC against line of dance, or DC or DW against line of dance. It's always where you're going is what the alignment is. Now another thing that a lot of the gentlemen really have trouble with, not so much the engineers, but if you have a little confusion about the spatial issues, is you have to understand how the alignments change when you come to a corner and you move to a new line. So we'll often talk about the long line of dance and the short line of dance, or the long wall and the short wall. So if I'm in the long line of dance and I'm approaching a corner, this corner now, my line of dance is going to change from here to here. Now everything applies in the new direction. If I stand in a box now facing this way, this is my line of dance. To my right is the wall. Of course, there is a wall there normally, or the edge of the ballroom floor. That is my center, or the center of the room. And again, then I'll have now DC would now be here, and diagonal wall would now be here. So if we're putting together a routine, where we may be looking at the technique, and we have a corner figure, we'll have a note there that we're changing line of dance. So as long as I was on my long line of dance, and this was diagonal center, as I approach a corner, now there's a wall here, that's my corner. This is now diagonal wall of my short line of dance. I hope this is making sense. I'm going to draw the little box on the paper, and when I give the gentleman a routine, I always make a note when they are changing line of dance or changing to the short wall or the short line of dance. But it helps to have something on paper that you can look at. Now, I do think that ladies should understand the alignments too. Of course, the gentleman is driving, and our direction is given to us by our partner and our partner's indications. And then our job as a lady, whether it's Latin or whether it's ballroom, is to move in the direction that we've been sent or invited or swung. And then the man has given us some indication to change our direction. So we are not the one in charge of keeping track of the alignments. But I do think it helps, the more knowledge we have of what our partner's job is, I do think it helps us to understand. So our directions are given to us as ladies by the gentleman, and also how we use our center and our arms, our frame, to always agree with our center, agree with our hands, to where his body is going. And then we allow our weight, if it's a swing dance, to fall in a comfortable way, not falling this way, but falling from the ankle to go where he's sent us. So the man really needs the alignments in order to drive. The woman should never be trying to force them. But I find that if the ladies don't understand the alignments in the beginning, when we're talking about amounts of turn, where it's technically important for her to open the door and understand pointing alignment, because she has to open her legs. If she doesn't understand a little bit about it, she'll have trouble mastering the technique. So I think it's very important that both partners learn the alignments and learn how it applies to them technically. But then when we're dancing, the lady needs to follow the direction of the man and give her weight to that direction until he helps her to change it. So that's just a little bit about the two roles. And let's take a look then how we see the alignments if we put that down on paper. Now, for those of you that are working through the technique book, or you're looking to really understand the language, alignment in the technique always refers to the feet. It does not refer to the body. Now, many times there's a note, the body turns less or the body completes the turn, which is now another topic. But understand that if the technique tells me that my left foot is pointing diagonal wall, the body turns less. You see, my body here, well, in this case, if this was the line of dance, my body's facing the line of dance, my foot here is pointed, or my body could be to wall and my foot is pointed diagonal wall. Body then completes the turn. So it's not where you're facing unless that specifically says so in the technique. If it says facing the line of dance, then I know that my feet and my body agree to be there. But many times we'll have a pointing alignment, and that tells you where the foot is pointed, not where your center is. So I'm not going to go into that in detail today, just a note of it. Alignment refers to the feet. So let's now look at this on paper. There's a little diagram. I put this on the long line. The sheet of paper is exactly the configuration of the ballroom floor. And so you can see the LOD is line of dance, and then could be backing the line of dance or against the line of dance. To our right is the wall. To our left is the center. And then on those diagonals, we have diagonal wall and diagonal center. And then here we have diagonal wall against line of dance, and DC, or diagonal center, against the line of dance. These alignments would apply all the way down until we're approaching the corner. And now we would be changing line of dance, or changing from the long wall to the short wall. So I'll flip the paper over, and this is how I have to think of it in my mind, is now everything I had on the long wall now applies to the short wall. So you can see this diagonal wall was diagonal center. But once we start applying our movement to this line, we now rename it diagonal wall. That's our diagonal center. Over here, that direction was against the line of dance, but this is now our line of dance. So everything has changed. And then if we were to come around to the next line of dance, we would be back to the first one again. So although it could seem a little confusing in the beginning, later on it's really, really practical, and it helps you to really understand where you're going and how you're placing your figures on the floor. So the floor craft is not just avoiding other couples, but it's also knowing how to place your material on the floor. Now this is very clear in the standard or the international style, but we would use all of the same if we're doing the American dancing, the social dancing. These directions will also help us to continue to move in the proper line of dance.